Hello students, welcome to Unacademy platform. This platform provides special live classes, daily live classes. There are structured courses, there are live tests, and you have unlimited access on subscription. This is the Unacademy Learning app. You can download it both on Google Play Store as well as Apple App Store. This is about me. This is my Telegram link and this is my Unacademy profile link. If you have any doubt, any question in my lectures, you can ping me here and your doubt will be resolved. Okay, so if you have any problem there, you can resolve it by asking the questions in which there will be link. Along with me, these are the top educators who have various courses and you can benefit from it by seeing those very courses. Now these are different subscription plans. For example, if you go with Plus, you have live classes there, test series is there, unlimited practice and structured schedule. If you go with Iconic, you have personal coach, daily mails question answer practice, study planner and personalized feedback. Now these are the different plans available which are of different durations and you can select or choose them according to your requirement, according to your need. And all these plans are available at 10% discount if you apply this very code, that is Amit PS. Again, these are the plans of different durations. You can select them and all these are available again at 10% discount if you apply this very code, that is Amit PS. These are the different optionals available on the platform and I take political science and international relations. Okay, again these are different plans available on the platform of different durations, so you can choose or you can select according to your requirement, according to your need, and all these are available at 10% discount. Again, if you apply this very code, that is Amit PS, okay, you will get 10% discount here. Now coming to our lecture part, so we covered a good section of Locke and we are going to cover the remaining one. And we have seen that the nature of the contract that is happening in Locke is different from Hobbes. We have also seen the state of nature. The picture of a state of nature is different when we compare it with Hobbesian state of nature. Hobbes provides a gloomy picture of a state of nature, whereas Locke provides a picture where uh, people have considerable freedom and considerable liberty. But the problem arises because in state of nature, everyone is going to interpret the law, okay, by using or by applying their own reason. So a conflict is bound to emerge when different interpretations are going to come out. Okay, this is because of the fact that natural law needs reason for its interpretation. If there are different interpretations, then there will be conflict. Okay, the problem becomes even more complex because of the absence of any civic authority, and that is why people do not have anyone to oblige by. Okay, and this is actually exacerbated by another fact that in state of nature there is no one to adjudicate law. Okay, and if any conflict arises, then it is not going to be concluded because people who are in conflict, who are party to the conflict, are having this very conflict because of two different interpretations that they have been able to derive from from natural law, and because of the absence of any authority to adjudicate law, they will continue fighting. So we have seen that finally a contract takes place, and through that contract we see the emergence of political community, a civil society. So government in Locke's account is not the result of the contract. Okay, government in Locke's account is not the result of the contract. It is result of the faith that has been bestowed upon it by the political community, which is the result of the contract. So we see that after the contract, it is the political community which is emerging in Locke, and not the government. So how government comes into being? Government comes as a fiduciary power, okay, as a fiduciary institution, uh, on whom this very political community, which is the result of contract, has vested their faith. So in that sense, government is going to be working on the trust of political community. Okay, now how this is going to make different from the account that we have seen in Hobbes? Because if you recall Hobbes, there the government, you can say the sovereign, was the result of the contract. Now sovereign was the result of the contract, although it was not party to the contract, and that is why sovereign is only the beneficiary of the contract. The obligations there are going to be on people who come together and create a contract there. The thing, this very scenario is different when it comes to Locke, because government, or the formation of government, is not the result of the contract, and that is why the political committee, which is bestowing this very authority with the power of government, is not going to have any duties towards the government. Okay, because the government is not an outcome of the contract. So that was actually the essence here when we talk about the formation of government in Locke's, okay, in Locke's theory. Okay, so the crux here is this, that in Locke's theory, the contract is generating a political community, and that political community is generating or bestowing this very government's power by faith, because it is not out of the contract that the government is emerging. So political community there is also not going to be having any duties towards this very government, as is the case with Hobbes. Okay, okay. Good morning, Jiten. Now Locke is known for putting limitations to the government's power, and that is why I say that Locke has actually created a modern system of government. Okay, has actually added a concluding chapter to the modern system of government. Okay, why I'm saying so? Because government that is being created here in Locke, or Locke's theory is a limited government. Okay, and limited government is actually a symbol of constitutionalism, which is the very basis of modern nation state. Okay, which have democracy and constitutionalism in their core. Now, what are those exact limitations? That is what we are going to cover here. Okay, so we are going to see the limitations now. According to Locke, law of nature stands as an eternal rule to all the make legislatures as well as others. Okay, all the members of legislatures as well as others. So Locke is saying that law of nature stands as an eternal rule. So whatever be the form of government, this natural law is not going to be defied. Okay, so it is going to be present here. If you compare the scheme with Hobbes, natural law is actually to be found inherently residing in positive law, because in Hobbesian scheme, sovereign is actually shaping the legal reality. Okay, So the legal reality comes into being by sovereign, and in that sense the law coming out of the sovereign is going to be a positive law. Now no one can actually complain against sovereign that any particular natural law is violated, because because it would be like going against themselves, because in that very contract people have agreed that no one is going to question sovereign on the ground that natural law is violated. Why so? Because it is the sovereign alone who is the interpreter of natural law. Now, there is no meaning in saying that sovereign has violated natural law, because sovereign is going to interpret the natural law according to his own wish. So, when he is coming out with any statement, it is definitely a positive law because it is coming from the government, but it is also going to be natural law because natural law's interpretation is also going to be determined by sovereign. The meaning here, or the crux of the argument here, is this: that in Locke we see the existence of natural law in its precinct form, okay, right from the beginning to the end. But in case of Hobbes, natural law, okay, even in the starting and also after the formation of the sovereign, is going to be submerged, or is going to be uh, included in the very positive law which is going to be given by sovereign. So in that sense, again, natural law loses its significance. So when it comes to natural law, it finds its most clear expression only in theory of Locke. Okay, so this much understanding you needed to have in order to understand other things here. Okay, so Locke also says that rules for governing actions of man should conform to the laws of nature. Okay, so the rules by which people are going to be governed, they are going to conform to the natural law. Okay, again, you are able to see the importance of natural law, the overriding importance that they have over any other thing. Okay, law of nature is the declaration of the will of the God, and no human action can be good or valid against it. Okay, so if you recall that natural law is based on reason, and reason is connected to God's reason. Through that connection, Locke is saying that law of nature is what? It is the declaration of the will of God. Now, if anything is committed against the will of the God, that is not going to be valid, or that cannot be considered good. Okay, so the result here is this: that there cannot be, or there possibly cannot be, any justification of the violation of natural law, because natural law represents the will of the God. Okay, and why it represents the will of the God? This is the connection. Natural law needs interpretation on the basis of reason. So reason is required for the interpretation of natural law. But reason is connected to the God's reason. Okay. In that sense, natural law gets connected to the God's will. Okay. God's will, or the will of the God. Now, if anything goes against, or if any act is done against natural law, that would mean that it is against the will of the God. If it is against the will of the God, that can never be called valid or good. So practically, there cannot be anything or any action which is violating natural law and at the same time is being called good or valid. This proposition is absurd according to the theory here. Okay. Preservation of life, liberty, and property forms one of the important parts of the declaration. Okay, preservation law of life, liberty, and property. So these are the natural rights. Okay, natural rights which are to be which have the sanction of natural law, and that is why they are to be safeguarded in every case. So the legislature is supreme power, although it cannot be arbitrary. Okay, so we have seen the three kinds of powers there. in Locke's separation of power, and legislature among all these three is the supreme. But even legislature cannot be arbitrary. Okay, so again, if you draw comparison between Hobbes' sovereign and Locke's limited government, then Locke is not going to entrust this very government with absolute power. Okay, so this is what we understand as limitations on the power of the government. So legislature being the supreme body here, even legislature cannot be arbitrary. It exists for the common good, which is the preservation of life, liberty, and property. Now see, government cannot rule by arbitrary and spontaneous laws. Okay, so government cannot rule by arbitrary and spontaneous laws and decrees, but only by duly promulgated and established laws. So government actually cannot come out with any law which has been spontaneously framed or has been arbitrarily designed. Okay, it must be established and duly promulgated. Further, supreme authority cannot take away any part of his property, any part of individual's property without his consent. Okay, so supreme authority here, that is the legislature cannot take anyone's property or any part of individual's property without his consent. Okay, and legislative cannot transfer the power of lawmaking to any other body. See, understand this, that government, as I said, is actually the result of the faith that has been bestowed on it by the political community. Okay, political community, which was the result of the in contract in Locke's theory. Now this very political community is having or putting its faith on this very government, and that is the basis of this very power of the government. But this faith that has been put by political community over the government does not give any right to the government to transfer its faith to any other body. Okay, so that is what it is being said here, that legislative cannot transfer the power of lawmaking to any other body. Now, what if a government doesn't observe the above limitation? If government does not observe the above limitation, then that would mean the breach of faith that has been bestowed upon it by the political community, which is the result of the contract. So if that faith is breached, that means what? Government loses its legitimacy, and people are well within their right to revolt against the law. Okay. Locke, in his second treatise, listed 5 grounds when government could be altered, amended, changed, or dissolved. So, what are these 5 grounds? These are 5 grounds that you are able to see here. Whenever such a prince or single person establishes his own arbitrary wills in place of laws. Okay. So, whenever a prince or a single person establishes his own arbitrary wills. So, Locke is going to be against arbitrary power. Okay. Now, if any arbitrary power is being imposed, that is a case fit enough where anyone can dissolve, amend, change, or alter the government. Okay. Now, the second premise is this, that when Prince hindered the legislature from assembling in its due time or from acting freely. So, in Locke's theory, ruler is not going to have any power if it is not backed by the will of the political community. Now, political community actually is putting its faith on the government, and if its functioning is being breached by any outside factor, in this case here it is prince, then that means that government which has been bestowed with the faith of political community is not able to honor that very faith. Okay, is not able to honor that very faith, and that is why it is not, or it would be correct, or it would be justified to alter it, amend it, change it, or dissolve it again. Okay, it is so simple to understand now. When by arbitrary power, the elections or the ways of elections were altered without consent and contrary to the common interest. Now understand here that again something is happening by the arbitrary power. And what is that? The elections or the ways of elections were altered without the consent and contrary to the common interest. Okay, if this is happening, again, government is not honoring the faith which has been bestowed upon it by the political community. Okay, and that is why again it will be justified to alter, amend, change, or dissolve the government. Now, the fourth is subjecting people to the foreign power. Again, a breach of trust. This again will be a ground uh, of justification for altering, amending, changing, or dissolving the government. Then finally, neglecting already enacted laws. If this is the case, that means this kind of neglecting of laws becomes a justified ground for alteration, amendment, change, or dissolution of the government. So these are the five grounds on which government can be changed or dissolved or amended. Okay, this is coming from his second treatise. Okay, now Locke is coming out with his theory of revolution. Okay, so this the meaning of revolution is going to be similar, slightly similar to the one that you have in Aristotle. Change in the government. Okay, see, read here. Locke provided the theory of revolution. In his theory of revolution, he doesn't mean violent overthrow of the government. No, it does not mean that. What does it mean? It was similar in the sense as Aristotle interpreted the revolution, which was simply the change in persons running the government. Okay, so the revolution in Locke's theory is what? Change in the people who are responsible for ruling. Although it isn't exactly the same meaning of revolution which Aristotle provided, because Aristotle interpreted revolution by change in the constitution. Yeah, yes. So, for example, if there was change, big or small, in the constitution, then that would have resulted, or that would have been called revolution by Aristotle. So, here in Locke's theory, it is not necessarily a change in the constitution. Okay, it is not necessarily a change in the constitution. It is a change in the rulers. Okay, it is a change in the persons who are running the government. Now we are coming to see Locke's theory of property and what is his account of the origin of property. Okay, so here he is coming out with his own theory. Locke says that initially property was held in common. Okay, initially property was held in common, but after that what happened? But property cannot be held in common for all time in future. Why? Because again, different people are going to be hardworking, talented, okay, to a different degree. And now those who are going to be more hardworking are going to appropriate more property in their favor. And that is why this kind of common ownership or property being held in common is not going to sustain for a long time. Okay, so those who are industrious, okay, those who are willing to take risk, okay, to start ventures, those who are industrious will come to acquire more property than others who were lazy, quarrelsome, and fanciful. Okay, this is actually very clear, I think. Locke suggests man's absolute right to property. Yes, he is actually suggesting man's absolute right to property. Okay, and that is why you see that it is actually the Locke and not Hobbes and not any other thinker who is going to be one of the intellectual founding father of American Constitution. Okay, which emerged after the revolution there. Okay, so Locke is actually one of the founding father, the intellectual founding father of American Constitution. The and you know that the role of USA America as the leader of the capitalist world. Okay, so in the whole era of Cold War, he actually wielded that kind of leadership. Uh, okay, as the lone leader of unquestioned leader of capitalist world. Okay, he still enjoys. America still enjoys that kind of image. According to Locke, property is the part of man's personality. Understand this very argument, it is important. Okay, according to Locke, property is a part of man's personality. Okay, why it is a part of man's personality? He's giving the reasons here. Part of man's personality. See, now in this very argument, he's actually giving the reason, or giving out the reason why, um, reason of the ownership of property. Why the ownership of property is actually justified. This is actually the reason. So why it is a part of the man's personality? Because the product of man's labor. Product of man's labor. Okay. It is because of the product of man's labor. So man has actually devoted his labor into that very property. Getting it? It is so because it is the product of man's labor. So for example, uh, if there are two three people and they go to a place where large ranches are available, and this very story is actually similar to one when Europeans, okay, make expedition to the North American land, and ultimately they come to acquire it. Okay, so what Locke seems to be saying, and now you will be able to understand that why and how Locke becomes one of the intellectual founding father of American Constitution, is this: that when, for example, imagine a situation when a group of people come to a range, okay, a free land here, then initially they will be having equal right. All of those people, the whole group will be having this very equal right over this very ranch, this very field. But this is not going to be true for all time to come, because many of them are going to be lazy. Some of them going to be industrious. So through their hard work, by mixing their labor with the land, they are going to make it their own. Okay, and Locke is saying that through this very mechanism, that property becomes the part of their personality, because they have mixed, they have toiled, they have worked hard on this very land, and they have mixed their sweat, their blood with it. Okay, and that is what making it part of their personality. And it is also the argument why he is able to defend, when he says that man has the absolute right to property. Okay, now see further. It is so because it is the product of man's labor. Okay, so why it is a part of man's personality? Because it is the product of man's labor. In Locke's account, one's labor can include the labor of his horses or equipment. Again, a justification. You would see the justification of those very people who came out of expedition and started owning the land in North America. See what they did, that those who own the horses and the motors and other instruments and equipments are going to appropriate more and more property in their favor by mixing their very labor with the land, because their labor is going to include the labor of their equipment that they own, and also the horses and other animals that they may be owning. Okay, so it is not just about the manual labor Locke is talking about. It is also about all the labor that is possible with all the equipments and the animal force. Okay, but he provided three limitations on right to property. Okay, now he is coming out with three limitations, and this again becomes very important to understand. So what are these three limitations? That is something that we are going to cover. First is labor limitation is there. What is labor limitation? Labor limitation is one can own property only as much as he has earned by use of his labor. Okay, so the property that is one can actually claim the rightful ownership is the one where one has actually mixed his labor. Okay, that was actually the reason why man has absolute right to property and why it is the part of man's personality. Okay, so this is the labor limitation. One cannot appropriate property more than the one which has been his own by the mixing of his own labor. Okay, so if it was the ownership goes beyond that amount of property, then that is not rightfully his property. Then the sufficiency limitation is there. What is a sufficiency limitation? One can have only that much property which one requires and leaves enough for others. Okay, so this sufficiency limitation means which one requires. Now, who is going to decide that how much one is requiring? That individual himself. Okay. The third is spoilers limitation. Spoilers limitation means one does not enjoy unlimited ownership over property and one should acquire that much property which can be properly utilized. Okay. So what he is actually trying to restrict or restrain is the wastage or the spoilage of property. If one cannot care about that very property, one cannot actually take care of it. If one cannot actually take care of it, and that is leading to the spoilage of the property, then that kind of ownership is not justified. And Locke is against the misuse and the spoilage of property. Okay. Now Locke is also of the opinion that no one should be deprived, okay, from earning the property. Getting it? So these are the three limitations on property. First is labor limitation, the second is sufficiency limitation, and the third is spoilage limitation. Okay. Now see, Locke Locke provided a definite role of the state with respect to right to property. And what is that role? Understand it? It is showing it is showing his concern for the safeguard that is needed to protect the right to property. A state is to oversee whether men's right over their possession is safe or not. Okay. So one sole purpose of the creation of a state has also been interpreted by scholars to be the theory of night watchman state. Okay, this theory of night watchman state is to be found in liberalism. Okay, so there in that very ideology, state is a necessary evil. Necessary evil. Okay, evil because it interferes or encroaches the individual freedom. Why necessary? Because it is required in order to provide a mechanism through which right to property could be safeguarded. Now, this very sole purpose that why state exists, or this very why state exists, why government is needed, this very premise that actually Locke is coming out with is also guiding or is also going to be the factor for the emergence of this very theory of state, where state is accorded the status of a night watchman. Okay, so as a night watchman, what state is supposed to do? State is not supposed to intervene or encroach over the individual's freedom. So what is the role of the state? Just to oversee that no one is entering or trespassing the property. That is, no one. That is, no one is actually posing any threat to the right to property of the individual. Actually, that is what you see. Uh, you understand to be the role of the night watchman. Okay. So what night watchman does? Night watchman does not enter into the apartments of the people. Yes, He's not allowed into enter into apartments of the people. So the metaphor that is being here is actually used in the sense that the state is not there to enter or to encroach over the individual's liberty. Then what is the role of the night watchman? Night watchman ensures that no trespassing takes place in the precinct or in the premises. Okay, no one who is not allowed to enter into the building, into the premises, is actually able to make any entry. That is the job of the watchman. So metaphorically, again, so what is the job of the state? What is the role of the state? State is there to oversee, okay, that no one's right to property is threatened, or no one's right to property is taken away from it. Okay, that is why it is a necessary evil in liberalism. We are going to see that in ideologies. Okay, in the upcoming centuries, Locke's theory of property inspired neoliberal scholars, most specifically Robert Nozick, okay, who came with his theory of entitlement. That is something that we are going to study in liberalism. Okay, actually, the crux of the neoliberalism is this, that uh, they accord very less importance to the state. Actually, they don't want a state to intervene in the sphere of justice or in the scheme of distribution. According to them, this is not the role of the state. Okay, now we are going to analyze his theory of property. The interpretation of Locke's theory of property. Understand it. Now understand that the theory that he has come out using which he actually defends individuals' right or unrestrained right to property is actually the origin of the famous labor theory of value. Okay, and this is something which is found in both classical and Marxist economics. So famous labor theory of value is actually the same thing, the same argument that you saw in Locke's theory, where one is able to appropriate that very property with which he mixes his blood and sweat. Okay, man creates property by mixing his labor with resources provided by the nature. Okay, so man creates property. So property is something which is created by man. It is not something which is given by nature. Nature provides resources, and when these resources are mixed with human labor, that becomes the property. Okay, since man owns his person, his body and limbs, the object with which he mixes his labor becomes his own property by right. Okay, so it's like saying that resources are there, present are presented before individual by the nature. Now, when man is mixing his labor with it, he is actually using his own faculty, okay, his own limbs, and because those limbs, those faculties are his own, that is why the natural resource with which he is going to mix that very faculty, or the power, the very force of those very faculties, that in turn also becomes his own, just like his faculties of mind or limbs. Okay, so this is actually what he has already explained it in previous last slide. Also, we have seen the same argument. Although he imposes limitations over positions, which are labor limitation, the sufficiency limitation, and spoils limitation, many critics, and one of the foremost among them is Macpherson, have found these limitations mostly verbal, which become insignificant in later stages. Okay, now Macpherson is coming out with a criticism of the limitations that actually Locke has imposed on his right to property. First, you have seen is the labor limitation, the second is spoilage limitation, and the third is sufficiency limitation. Now, Macpherson is going to give reasons that why all those limitations are actually meaningless. So, according to Macpherson, spoilage limitation is meaningless after the intervention of money. Okay, so when it was about grains, say for example, weed, rice, when it was about only those forms of money, then those forms of money or those forms of property actually had an expiry date attached to it. Okay, so after a time they are going to be spoiled because, okay, because of rust and because of, all that. So because they are the staple food, so they are going to be spoiled. But what if that property is preserved in form of, say, notes, currency notes? No, currency notes and coins, they do not have expiry date. Okay, so if they remain the legal tender money, there is no way that they are going to be spoiled by dust or by dust particles. There can be soiling of those very notes, but that can be exchanged with the bank. Okay, so spoilage limitation is actually meaningless with the invention of money. Okay, because those value of money can be stored in a media which does not decay. So the currency notes and coins does not decay, and that is why they are not going to be spoiled, and that is why spoilage limitation is not going to be workable in that very case. Getting it? So I think this is simple to understand. Next come sufficiency limitation. What is sufficiency limitation? According to him, is a covert justification of right to unequal property. Okay, if you recall sufficiency limitation, it meant that one is rightfully justified in acquiring that much property which one requires. Okay, now who requires how much is going to be decided by the individual himself. So if individual is wishing that he requires 10 times of the average property that is held in that very state, that in that sense no one is going to deny that that very requirement is not justified. Okay, so using that very argument, Macpherson says that sufficiency limitation is also meaningless, or not only meaningless, it is actually a justification of right to unequal property. Okay, getting it? If you're not getting it, just recall what we had in the definition of sufficiency limitation. What was sufficiency limitation? One can have only that much property. Now the language seems to be as if Locke is really serious about appropriation or concentration of wealth, but that is not the case here. One can have only that much property of which one requires and leaves enough for the others. Okay, only that much property of which one requires. Now, how much one requires, that is going to be decided by that individual alone. Okay, so if he, that is what I'm saying, that if he thinks or if he claims that he requires 10 times or 20 times of the median income of that particular region, then he is justified in requiring that much of property. No one can question that his requirement is not justified because it is 20 times more than the median income in that very region. And that is why Macpherson is saying that this sufficiency limitation is actually a covert expression or acceptance or justification of unequal property. Okay, of unequal property. Hmm. About labor limitation, Macpherson said that it was never considered by Locke himself very seriously. Okay, so Macpherson is of the view that with regard to labor limitation, he himself was not very serious because one does not find any logical consistency in his labor limitation part, because he is going to, or he is suggesting that one is able to mix his labor with property, then that very natural resource becomes the property of that very individual. But what is labor? If labor is manual, then that is something that is understandable. But if labor also includes the labor of animals and equipments, then one who has more property will also be having access to more and more equipments and more animal power, and is using that kind of power, he is able to appropriate or will be able to appropriate more and more property, a lot more property in his favor. Okay, and that is something that has not been reflected upon by Locke. Okay, seriously, that is what Macpherson is saying here. Okay, so the introduction of wage labor, which means the right to purchase the labor of others on payment of wages, makes it possible and rightful for a man to appropriate the product of the other man's labor. If horse and equipments, that is animal power, and every other media that can be employed to aid the power of man is going to be used, okay, then any individual's power will have no limitation. Okay, so one individual can go on appropriating the whole property of the world in his favor. Okay, if you take this kind of calculus into account. Okay, so by possessing the wage labor, one can go on amassing more in property, and according to a law, that is going to be perfectly justified. Okay, so that is why Macpherson is saying that this has not been taken seriously by Locke himself. Okay, Locke also gives a man the right to bequeath his property. Okay, so one has the right to bequeath property in Locke's theory, and this was interpreted by Macpherson as the acceptance of bourgeois view. Okay, so according to Macpherson, this is the bourgeois view which has been reflected. Bourgeois view means, bourgeois ideology means the ideology of industrialist class. Okay, ideology of industrialist class who actually defend the unqualified privatization and unqualified concentration of wealth. So that is what is being defended here by Locke. That is the actual charge of Macpherson, because Locke also allows the right to bequeath his property. It is also reflected in Macpherson's criticism that if Locke would have been really serious about the labor limitation, then he would not have allowed the bequeathing of his property. Okay, because one's progenitors or descendants have not mixed their labor with the property. So others who are ready to go for that kind of toiling, that kind of hard work, should get the chance to appropriate that property in their favor, which at one time was actually appropriated by one who was more industrious than other. So that kind of a space or that kind of room is not available to the people, because Locke provides this very right to bequeath his property to others, okay, to the descendants. Okay, now in this way, Macpherson concludes that Locke not only justifies the right to unequal property, but approves the unlimited individual appropriation. Now this is clear. Okay, so in Locke's theory, there is a justification for the unlimited individual appropriation. This is so because once he is very vocal and very open about his defense of unrestrained right to property, then when he comes out with his limitations that are to be put in the ownership of property, after the analysis, it is clear that those very limitations are not going to be workable. Okay, in this way, Macpherson concludes that what not only justifies the right to unequal property, but approves unlimited individual appropriation. Now, this is important from analysis point of view and also from the conclusion point of view. Locke is presented in this analysis of Macpherson as a scholar of possessive individualism. Okay, so individualism is something that you already understand. Okay, so possessive individualism, it will be easily understood by you. I have dealt this very topic in Hobbes. Ideology of market economy, ideologue of market economy. Okay, these things, possessive individualism, market economy is yet to emerge. Okay, in European turf, but Locke has created a very fertile intellectual ground for its emergence. Okay, so that is why Locke is facing these kind of charges. Ideologue of market economy and dictatorship of bourgeois. Okay, he's also seen as a representative of spirit of capitalism. Okay, this view of Macpherson that interprets Locke as the ideologue of bourgeois has been challenged by scholars like Isa Berlin, okay, Martin Sellizer, and John Donne. According to them, Macpherson's view overlooks the overriding role of natural law, the idea of common good that it implies. Okay, and they are also of the opinion that in Locke's account, the belief in God is too powerful to make him capable of doing such mistakes. That is the justification of unlimited appropriation of property. So this is actually a defense coming from these very scholars. You can use these very scholars to have a counter opinion, a counter argument against the Macpherson. But you have seen that the Macpherson's case seems to be more strong because of the arguments that he provides. Okay. See, uh, here they are coming with this argument. Locke is too much a medievalist and a believer in God to ignore the dictates of divine reason and forward the cause of rising capitalist class whose those are cutthroat competition for wealth accumulation resulting in the misery of have-nots. Getting it? So this is actually the argument coming from these very scholars, Isa Berlin, Martin Seligman, and John Donne. Okay, this is the line of argument that they are going to adopt in defense of Locke. Okay, so he's too much a believer in God to ignore the dictates of divine reason. So the argument that they are countering Macpherson is this, that he is actually a believer in God and that is why he is not going to do anything which goes against the dictates of divine reason. So I don't think this is a very strong argument, a very strong justification, very strong counter to Macpherson because just by the belief in God, just because of his belief in God, or just because he did not consider anything against the divine reason or dictates of God, that is not a ground that anyone can provide to counter analytical arguments which have been forwarded by Macpherson against Locke. Okay, so I don't think this is a very strong argument here. Okay, so what they are saying is this, that it is to be understood in case of Locke that he is actually a believer in God. So whatever he is saying, according to him, is saying only because in his analysis it is not against the dictates of divine reason. And that is why it is not to be taken as something which is not justified. Because Locke is a believer in God. And if Locke has not found those very things opposing the dictates of divine reason, then that should be accepted by the community. Now, this shows the weakness of argument that it is based on actually the faith or the belief in God or belief in divine reason. That is something, those premises have been dismantled, okay, much before Locke. So this is a very futile attempt to defend Locke here. Locke on natural law and natural right and relation between law and liberty. See what he's got to say on natural law and natural right and the relation between law and liberty. Natural law is central to Locke's philosophy. You have seen enough evidence of it. Okay. For Locke, it is the pre-political as well as pre-social. Okay, so natural law prevailed in the state of nature. State of nature is state of peace and mutual assistance. Okay, natural law prevails in the state of nature, which is nothing but God's reason. The concept of natural right to life, liberty, and property are also derived from natural law. This is all you have seen. Okay, I don't think you need explanation here. At times, Locke has used the word right to property to include life and liberty as well. Okay, it gives two meanings. First, without property, the life and liberty carries no meanings. Yes, that is quite clear. Second, it is man's property and not the property of state. Yes, all that has been analyzed well. Okay, in the previous headings. For Hobbes, positive law dominates over natural law. After the formation of civil society, natural law becomes a part of the positive law. Okay, because again I will help you in recalling that in Hobbes' scheme, sovereign is going to shape the legal reality. Okay, and for this reason, natural law founds or becomes part of positive law, because whatever sovereign says becomes law, and that kind of law is positive law, and no one can actually question sovereign that he has not followed natural law, because sovereign alone is the interpreter of natural law. So sovereign will be simply saying that yes, I have followed natural law, and that must be obeyed by the subjects there. Okay, because it is sovereign's account or sovereign's interpretation of natural law which is going to be relevant. Hobbesian individual can't disobey a positive law on the premise that it is against natural law. Okay, this is very important. You must be able to understand it, and I think that I'm confident that you will be able to understand it if you have followed the series here. Okay, so Hobbesian individual can't disobey a positive law on the premise that it is against natural law. Why? Because natural law is to be interpreted by the sovereign himself. So if someone makes an argument that sovereign is not making or following natural law, that argument is infructuous or absurd, because how does he come to know that sovereign is not following the natural law at the time or in a situation where sovereign alone is the interpreter of natural law? Okay, whereas for Locke, positive laws are only so far right as they are founded on the law of nature. Okay, so for Locke, positive laws are only so far right as they are founded on the law of nature. So in Locke, positive law, that is the law coming from the government, okay, laws made by the legislature, they should every time they should conform to the natural law. So the all pervasive effect or the overriding effect here, that is going to be of natural law and not positive law. So every positive law has to be in congruence with the natural law. That means any law or any legislation that government is going to come out with is going to or should be in conformity with the natural law. Okay, I think all this is clear now. You can raise questions if you have any doubt here. Okay, so law whereas for law, positive laws are only so far right as they are founded on the laws of nature by which they are to be regulated and interpreted. Okay, in other words, executive must interpret the law in light of the understanding of natural law. Okay, if it is not so, then those laws are not justified. Okay, those laws goes against the faith which has been bestowed upon the government by the political community, which was the result of the first contract in Hobbes' state of after the Hobbes comes out with an agreement or with a scheme of contract which leads or paves the way for the formation of the government. Okay, now this is again a statement that if there is no law, then there will be no liberty. Again, the statement coming from Locke himself. Now we are going to analyze this also. So above statement shows what? That he is a supporter of tradition, of due process of law and natural law. How so? See, the connection that we are going to establish here is going to be slightly complex. So it will require your full attention here. See, understand here. Above statement shows Locke as a supporter of the tradition of due process of law and natural law. We are going to see that. No law means no liberty. According to law, man was able to enjoy liberty in the state of nature. Okay, this should be something that you will be recalling, that in a state of nature, man was actually having liberty. Okay, so man was having reality even in a state of nature. But what went wrong with the state of nature? That the liberty and all other rights which man was having, they were based on natural law. Okay, and natural law required reason for its interpretation. And because reason or man's capacity to reason is going to be different, or different men will be interpreting natural law, okay, on the basis of their own reason, then that will lead to a of interpretation conflict of interpretation so far as natural laws are concerned, or the rights which are emerging from natural laws. Okay, and that conflict had no end because the conflicting parties will not be ready to accept the interpretation of law which is being offered by the opponent. So they are going to stick to their own version, their own interpretation of natural law. And because of the absence of civic authority, because of the absence of any authority to adjudicate on laws and to judge whether whose interpretation is correct, that conflict which arose because of the differences in the interpretation is not going to end. That is actually the problem in the state of nature. Now, with this very background, you will understand every argument here. Just pay full attention. Okay. So, according to Locke, man was able to enjoy liberty in the state of nature because of the presence of reason. Okay. Reason in man guides him not to harm others in his life, liberty, and property. Hence, a state of nature was a state of peace, goodwill, and mutual assistance. Okay. Liberty remains protected even after the creation of a state. Yes. Now, people there in political community which was created after the contract was signed, they are bestowing their faith on government. They are not transferring their right to the government. Okay, as was the case with Hobbes, there people actually relinquished or transferred their natural rights to the sovereign. But here people are not transferring their rights to the government. Okay, so hence read again. Hence, state of nature was state of peace, goodwill, and mutual assistance. Liberty remains protected even after the creation of a state. Okay, man hasn't transferred his right to life, liberty, and property. Okay, reason suggests that they are inalienable. Reason suggests that they are inalienable. Positive law has to conform to the due process of law. Positive law means law coming from the legislature. It has to conform to the due process of law. Law even gives the right to revolt in case government breaks the law, breaks the trust. Okay, in this way he suggests that if there is no law, then there is no liberty. Okay, so liberty here is going to be defended, or it is going to be present only because of natural law. Okay, if natural law is violated, then liberty is going to be destroyed. So if when Locke say that there is no law, if there is no law, then there is no liberty, then the law, the kind of that law that he's referring to is not is not the positive law, but it is the natural law. Okay, now if any positive law, that is the law coming from the legislature or the government, is in contravention with any of the natural laws, then that law must be declared invalid. Okay, null and void. Why? Because it is in violation of natural law, which is the dictates of reason, and that is why coming from the good God's will. Okay, which is the reflection of God's will. So anything which is against God's will can never be good or can never be desirable. Now, if this is followed, then the liberty, which is actually the result of natural law, or which exists because there is natural law, is going to be safeguarded. Otherwise, it is going to be destroyed, it is going to be encroached. Okay, so now you understand that reason in man is condition for liberty. How? Because it is only through reason natural law is interpreted, and natural law is the only guarantee for liberty, and that is why positive law needs to conform to the natural law. And in the process of knowing whether any particular positive law is in conformity with the natural law, you will need to inquire about that very law, and in that very process you are going to follow due process of law. Okay, so I think that is clear by now. Log on toleration. So you will see this log on toleration. Okay, see this. In 17th century Europe, use of religious tolerance was very much widespread. Okay, Europe was split into two competing religious groups, camps, as a result of Reformation. So you have um, Catholic on one side and Protestant on the other side. Against this backdrop, Locke in his essay titled Concerning Toleration suggested for the religious tolerance, and Locke's argument on religious toleration are related to account of his civil government. Okay, as I told you that more than political science, they are going to be useful in GS4 and essay also. So use these arguments. Locke defines life, liberty, and property to be of civil interest. Okay, the magistrate can use force and violence when it is necessary to preserve civil interests. This, according to Locke, is the central function of the state. However, once religious concerns of salvation are not within the doctrine of civil interest and lie outside the legitimate concern of the magistrate. Okay, so the religious concerns, salvation, are not within the doctrine of civil interest. Okay, that is why they are not going to be decided by the magistrate. In this way, Locke adds one additional right to of freedom to choose one's religion along with life, liberty, and property. And this is something which is less highlighted, and I will suggest you to remember it. Okay. Locke provides following reasons for toleration. According to Locke, the core of the man's soul has not been committed to the magistrate by either God or the consent of the man. It was only their faith, the faith of the political community on the government, so far as the uh, exercise of the adjudication and the formation of laws was concerned. It was never about their soul. It was never about their conscience. All that has not been committed to magistrate. Power of government is only in the form of application of force, while true religion consists of genuine inward persuasion of the mind and soul. So if what he is defending is that government is not justified in pressurizing or in applying the force in matters of religion, because true religion consists of genuine inward persuasion, and application of force is not going to persuade someone genuinely. Okay, so that is not the way how one comes to have faith in any particular religion. Okay, one comes to have faith in any particular religion only through genuine inward persuasion and transformation of in at the level of mind and soul. That is not going to happen with the application of force here. Okay, he also said that in matters of soul God does not appoint the magistrate. Okay, so there is no point in using the force. However, Locke imposes certain limitations on the religious tolerance. And what are those limitations? According to Locke, no opinion or moral rules, if they are contrary to human society or anything that is necessary for preservation of civil society, are to be tolerated by magistrate. So any religious opinion or moral rules, if they are contrary to human society or anything that is necessary for the preservation of civil society, they are not to be tolerated. Okay. So for example, if any religious community comes with an argument about any dehumanizing practice that this is our religious practice, and we should be given this very right to practice our religion according to our choice. But Locke says that those kind of practices which are not in conformity with human values or human society, or goes against something which is required for the preservation of civil society, those kind of religious values or religious opinions or rules are not to be permitted by the magistrate. Atheists should not be tolerated. Here he becomes radical. Okay, atheists should not be tolerated because their promises, covenants, and oaths won't have the theistic foundation. See, you see a great deal of faith in God when you study Locke. Okay, so I don't think that this is a very strong argument when you are advocating for tolerance. Yes or no? Good evening. Good evening. Evaluation. Evaluation. Now we are going to evaluate. Vaughan is again someone who is coming out with 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 this very statement here. Everything in Locke's system revolves around individual. Everything is disposed to so as to ensure the sovereignty of the individual. Okay, so this you will be able to answer if you have attended my lecture where I dealt with this very value of individualism. Okay, so I have talked about it in my lecture on Hobbes. So I have talked all the versions of individualism, and please see that. Okay, please attend that lecture, and there you will see that it is going to be easy to analyze it. Okay, so individualism as a social outlook and political philosophy emphasize on the moral worth of the individual. Okay, and then classical liberalism takes individual as a unit of analysis. So now John Locke is considered as an individualist on the following grounds. Okay, what makes any thinker individualist? I have already dealt with this very topic in my previous video where I was discussing Hobbes. Okay, theory of natural right, right to life, liberty, and property are inalienable. Okay, so these kinds of rights are going to exist for whom? Community or individual? It is going to exist only for community, only for individual. Then absolute right to property, again for individual. Limited estate, so that it does not encroach over the liberty of individual, again for individual. The state is based on consent, yes, that you have seen in the previous lecture. Revolt in case the government breaks the trust. That is also one reason why he is caring about, or he seems to be caring about, individuals foremost. Separation of power for protection of liberty. Liberty of whom? Individual. Theory of tolerance. Again, for the conscience of the individual. Freedom of conscience of the individual. And individual's freedom of conscience. Okay, Macpherson. It is a hard indeed to turn the Lockean doctrine into any kind of unqualified theory of democracy. Okay, so what Macpherson is saying, that Locke's or Lockean doctrine cannot be termed or cannot be regarded as the unqualified theory of democracy, because according to Macpherson, Locke is going to promote unqualified privatization, unqualified ownership, or disproportionate ownership of wealth. In that sense, he is also going to favor concentration of wealth in few hands and all the injustice that is ensued by that kind of proposition, that is concentration of wealth in few hands. Okay, so in that sense, Macpherson has also said that Locke's theory is not giving rise to any democracy. It is actually giving rise to the dictatorship of bourgeois, dictatorship of industrialist. Okay, so that is something which you can use in order to make sense of this very statement by Macpherson. Macpherson has provided detailed analysis of different theories of democracy. In John Locke's theory, he proposes limited government is elected by majority. Okay, according to Locke, explicit consent. Explicit means uh, overt, clear. Consent was given by majority, and minority has given tacit consent. That is covert consent. Okay, in indirect consent. Now, see, in Locke's theory, this consent hasn't been defined in such a manner which could be beyond any kind of criticism. Okay, so why? Because those who are not raising any objections, according to Locke's scheme, are going to be accepted as people who have given or have forwarded their consent. Okay, so tacit consent is actually not a real kind of consent here. But this very criticism is also not very strong because any workable solution can be found only by considering this kind of majority. Okay, 100% concurrence is only theoretically real. It cannot be practically real in all the cases. In Locke's theory, this consent has been defined in such a manner which could be beyond any kind of criticism, although it forms the fundamental principle of his theory. Okay, Locke has also ensured life, liberty, and property, and the limitations imposed by him become insignificant in the ownership of property, which, according to Macpherson's reading, will lead to disproportionate concentration of wealth by some individuals. I have already dealt with these themes earlier also. Okay, if government attempts for any kind of welfare oriented rich distribution, it is going to be a recipe of revolt, because that kind of a step by the government is going to be opposing the very premise of Locke's theory, and that is again going to make the case justified for the amendment, change, altering, and dissolution of the government. You have seen that very thing in this very lecture only. Macpherson, who is a liberal egalitarian, calls John Locke as a scholar of possessive individualism and ideologue of bourgeois class. Okay, you have also seen that he has went on to declare Locke as the one who is the defender of of dictatorship of bourgeois, that is the industrialist class. According to him, this his theory of government and democracy and also right of property serve the interest of bourgeois class and bourgeois class alone. Okay, Locke and liberalism. Understand this also, although this is the only two slides that you have to cover. Liberalism as an ideology we will study, okay, in the chapter of ideologies, but I have explained a lot in this and the previous two lectures, okay, which will make this very slide to understand, okay, comfortably. Locke has been considered as a father of liberalism. In Locke, we see both forms of liberalism, that is, the conservative liberalism, and based on the idea of natural law and divine reason, and its radical version based on the idea of individuals' natural right to life, liberty, and property, and resistance to arbitrary political power. Okay, this is actually explained in this very video and the previous one also. I don't think if you don't understand anything, you can ask. Okay, because this has been explained earlier. If we apply Karl Mannheim's sociology of knowledge, it can be, see, whenever you get any questions, then please apply these kind of evidences to support your argument. Okay. So Karl Mann has come out with sociology of knowledge, where the central argument is this, that theory or the theory building or the thought should be seen by considering the context, okay, and the timing. So if we apply Karl Mann's sociology of knowledge, it can be seen that liberalism was a philosophy of emerging bourgeois. Okay, the thirst of the absolute right to property by liberal thinkers presented before is the idea that ideology represents the interest of the particular class. Okay, and here you will see further that Locke's emphasis on toleration, limited government, separation of power, state as a night watchman, all these ideas became part of the liberal democratic tradition that will emerge after a time. After some time, they are going to emerge. Okay, in that sense, it seems as if they are being influenced by Locke's theory or Locke's account of uh, theory, social contract, limited government, and many other opinions that he has forwarded in his theories. He became the source of inspiration for liberals like Montesquieu. Okay, he's known for separation of power. Milton Friedman, a very famous neoliberal scholar. Isabellin Dorkin, and even John Rawls, social egalitarian John Rawls. Okay, these are the people you will be most comfortable with after some time. Okay, in political science discipline. Okay, So this was all about Locke. Okay. Now, if you go with any kind of plan in Unacademy, apply this very code Amit PS in order to get 10% discount. Okay, so if you apply this very code Amit PS, you will get 10% discount. So that was all for this very video. Thank you.